We looked at each other. "You'll have inquiries made at the station, of course," I said. "Naturally, but I'm not over sanguine as to the result. You know what that station is like." I did. King's Abbot is a mere village, but its station happens to be an important junction. Most of the big expresses stop there, and trains are shunted, resorted, and made up. It has 2 or 3 public telephone boxes. At that time of night, 3 local trains come in close upon each other to catch the connection with the express for the north, which comes in at 10:19 and leaves at 10:23. The whole place is in a bustle, and the chances of one particular person being noticed telephoning or getting into the express are very small indeed. "But why telephone at all?" demanded Melrose. "This is what I find so extraordinary. There seems no rhyme or reason in the thing." Poirot carefully straightened a china ornament in one of the bookcases. "Be sure there is a reason," he said over his shoulder. "But what reason could it be?" "When we know that, we shall know everything. This case is very curious and very interesting." There was something almost indescribable in the way he said those last words. I felt that he was looking at the case from some peculiar angle of his own, and what he saw I could not tell. He went to the window and stopped there, looking out. "You say it was 9 o'clock, Dr. Shepherd, when you met the stranger outside the gate?" He asked the question without turning around. "Yes," I replied. "Oh, excuse me. I heard the church clock chime the hour. How long would it take him to reach the house, to reach this window, for instance?" 5 minutes at the outside, 2 or 3 minutes only if he took the path at the right of the drive and came straight here. But to do that, he would have to know the way. How can I explain myself? It would mean that he had been here before, that he knew his surroundings." "That is true," replied Colonel Melrose. "We could find out, doubtless, if Mr. Ackroyd had received any strangers during the past week." "Young Raymond could tell us that," I said. "Or Parker," suggested Colonel Melrose. "Ou tous les deux," suggested Poirot, smiling. I think it means both. Colonel Melrose went in search of Raymond, and I rang the bell once for Parker. Colonel Melrose returned almost immediately, accompanied by the young secretary, whom he introduced to Poirot. Geoffrey Raymond was fresh and debonair as ever. He seemed surprised and delighted to make Poirot's acquaintance. "No idea you'd been living among us incognito, Monsieur Poirot," he said. "It'll be a great privilege to watch you work. Hello, what's this?" Poirot had been standing just to the left of the door, and now he moved suddenly aside suddenly, and I saw that while my back was turned, he must have swiftly drawn out the armchair till it stood in the position Parker had indicated. "Want me to sit in the chair whilst you take a blood test?" asked Raymond good-humoredly. "What's the idea?" "Monsieur Raymond, this chair was pulled out, so, last night, when Mr. Ackroyd was found killed. Someone moved it back into place. Did you do so?" The secretary's reply came without a second's hesitation. "No, indeed, I didn't. I don't even remember that it was in that position, but it must have been if you say so. Anyway, somebody else must have moved it back to its proper place. Have they destroyed a clue in doing so? Too bad." "It is of no consequence," said the detective. "Of no consequence whatever. What I really want to ask you is this, Monsieur Raymond. Did any stranger come to see Mr. Ackroyd during this past week?" The secretary reflected for a minute or two, knitting his brows, and during the pause Parker appeared in answer to the bell. "No," said Raymond at last. "I can't remember anyone. Can you, Parker?" "I beg your pardon, sir. Any stranger coming to see Mr. Ackroyd this week?" The butler reflected for a minute or two. "There was a young man who came on Wednesday, sir," he said at last, "from Curtis and Trout. I understood he was." Raymond moved this aside with an impatient hand. My eyes are vaguely working. "Oh, I'm working again. Oh, finally. Okay, hold on. Let me put this back in its place. Let's hope I stay working for the class the whole time. And of course I didn't. Oh well, it is what it is. I worked for 5 seconds. Where am I? Raymond moved this aside with an impatient hand. "Oh yes, I remember, but that is not the kind of stranger this gentleman means." He turned to Poirot. Mr. Ackroyd had some idea of purchasing a dictaphone, he explained. It would have enabled us to get through a lot more work in limited time. The firm in question sent down their representative, but nothing came of it. Mr. Ackroyd did not make up his mind to purchase. Poirot turned to the butler. Can you describe this young man to me, my good Parker? He was fair-haired, sir, and short, very neatly dressed in a blue serge suit. A very presentable young man, sir, for his station in life. Poirot turned to me. The young man you met outside the gate, doctor, was tall. Was he not? Yes, I said, somewhere about 6 feet tall, I should say. There is nothing in that, then, declared the Belgian. I thank you, Parker. The butler spoke to Raymond. Mr. Hammond has just arrived, sir. He is anxious to know if he can be of any service, and he would be glad to have a word with you. I'll come at once, said the young man. He hurried out. Poirot looked inquiringly at the chief constable. Hello, everyone who's come in. Welcome to the reading. Feel free to check in with the attendance button. As you can see, my facial tracking is not working at the moment. It's kind of going in and out. So, you may have a ventriloquist today. I'm not sure. We'll see how this works. But if you're here for the first time, welcome to reading Agatha Christie. This is one of my favorites, if not my favorite. Okay. Hi, Aunt. Hello. Welcome. It's a scuff stream already with my face. Alright, let's see. The family solicitor, Monsieur Poirot, said the latter. It is a busy time for this young Monsieur Raymond, murmured Poirot. He has the air efficient, that one. I believe Mr. Ackroyd considered him a most able secretary. Hi, Lorelei! Puppet Sophia. Yes, I'm Puppet today. I don't know what's going on, because it worked like 5 minutes while I was setting up the stream, and then it just stopped. So, we'll see what happens. But, yes, welcome. Welcome, welcome. I'm working again. I'm not moving. Okay, here we go. Who knows what's happening? Okay. I believe Mr. Ackroyd considered him a most able secretary. He has been here how long? Just on 2 years, I fancy. His duties he fulfills punctiliously. Of that I am sure. In what manner does he amuse himself? Does he go in for le sport? Private secretaries haven't much time for that sort of thing, said Colonel Melrose, smiling. Raymond plays golf, I believe, and tennis in the summer-time. He does not attend the courses, I should say the running of the horses? Race meetings? No, I don't think he's interested in racing. Poirot nodded and seemed to lose interest. He glanced slowly around the study. I have seen, I think, all that there is to be seen here. I, too, looked around. If those walls could speak, I murmured. Poirot shook his head. A tongue is not enough, he said. They would have to also have also eyes and ears. But do not be too sure that these dead things, he touched the top of the bookcase as he spoke, are always dumb. To me they speak sometimes. Chairs, tables, they have their message. He turned away towards the door. What message? I cried. What have they said to you today? He looked over his shoulder and raised one eyebrow quizzically. Can I do it? Not really. An opened window, he said. A locked door. A chair that apparently moved itself. To all three I say, why? And I find no answer. He shook his head, puffed out his chest, and stood blinking at us. He looked ridiculously full of his own importance. It crossed my mind to wonder whether he was really any good as a detective. Had his big reputation been built up on a series of lucky chances? I think the same thought must have occurred to Colonel Melrose, for he frowned. Anything more you want to see, Monsieur Poirot? He inquired brusquely. You would perhaps be so kind as to show me the silver table from which the weapon was taken? After that, I will trespass on your kindness no longer. We went to the drawing-room, but on the way the constable waylaid the colonel, and after a muttered conversation, the latter excused himself and left us together. I showed Poirot the silver table, and after raising the lid once or twice and letting it fall, he pushed open the window and stepped out on the terrace. I followed him. Inspector Raglan had just turned the corner of the house and was coming towards us. His face looked grim and satisfied. So there you are, Monsieur Poirot, he said. Well, this isn't going to be much of a case. I'm sorry, too. A nice enough young fellow gone wrong. Poirot's face fell, and he spoke very mildly. I'm afraid I shall not be able to be of much aid to you, then? Next time, perhaps, said the inspector soothingly, though we don't have murders every day in this quiet little corner of the world. Poirot's gaze took on admiring quality. You have been of marvelous promptness, he observed. How exactly do you go to work, if I may ask? Certainly, said the inspector. To begin with, method. That's what I always say. Method. Ah, cried the other. That, too, is my watchword. Method, order, and the little gray cells. The cells? Said the inspector, staring. The little gray cells of the brain, explained the Belgian. Oh, of course. Well, we all use them, I suppose. In a greater or lesser degree, murmured Poirot, and there are too differences in quality. Then there is the psychology of a crime. One must study that. Ah, said the inspector. You've been bitten with all this psychoanalysis stuff? Now I'm a plain man. Mrs. Raglan would not agree, I'm sure to that, said Poirot, making a little bow. Inspector Raglan, a little taken aback, bowed. You don't understand, he said, grinning broadly. Lord, what a lot of difference language makes. I'm telling you how I set it to work. First of all, method. Mr. Ackroyd was last seen alive at 9:45 by his niece, Miss Flora Ackroyd. That's fact number 1, isn't it? If you say so. Well, it is. At 10:30, the doctor here says that Mr. Ackroyd had been dead at least half an hour. You stick to that, doctor? Certainly, I said, half an hour or longer. Very good. That gives us exactly a quarter of an hour in which the crime must have been committed. I make a list of everyone in the house and work through it, setting down opposite their names where they were and what they were doing between the hour of 9:45 and 10 p.m. He handed a sheet of paper to Poirot. I read it over his shoulder. It ran as follows, written in a neat script. Major Blunt, in billiard room with Mr. Raymond. Latter confirms. Mr. Raymond, billiard room. See above. Mrs. Ackroyd, 9:45, watching billiard match. Went up to bed 9:55. Raymond and Blunt watched her up staircase. Miss Ackroyd went straight from her uncle's room upstairs. Confirmed by Parker, also housemaid Elsie Dale. Servants. Parker went straight to butler's pantry. Confirmed by housekeeper Miss Russell, who came down to speak to him about something at 9:47 and remained at least 10 minutes. Miss Russell, as above, spoke to housemaid Elsie Dale upstairs at 9:45. Ursula Bourne, the parlor maid, in her own room until 9:55, then in servants' hall. Mrs. Cooper, the cook, in servants' hall. Gladys Jones, second housemaid, in servants' hall. Elsie Dale, upstairs in bedroom, seen there by Miss Russell and Miss Flora Ackroyd. Mary Thripp, the kitchen maid, servants' hall. The cook has been here 7 years, the parlor maid 18 months, and Parker just over a year. The others are new, except for something fishy about Parker. They seem quite all right. A very complete list, said Poirot, handing it back to him. I'm quite sure that Parker did not do the murder, he added gravely. So is my sister, I struck in, and she's usually right. Nobody paid any attention to my interpolation. That disposes pretty effectively of the household, continued the inspector. Now we come to a very grave point. The woman at the lodge, Mary Black, was pulling the curtains last night when she saw Ralph Patten turn in at the gate and go up towards the house. She is sure of that? I asked sharply. I just blanked out. Where is that? Quite sure. She knows him well by sight. He went past very quickly and turned off by the path to the right, which is a short-cut to the terrace. And what time was that? Asked Poirot, who had sat with an immovable face. Exactly 25 minutes past 9, said the inspector gravely. There was a silence. Then the inspector spoke again. It's all clear enough. It fits in without a flaw. At 25 minutes past 9, Captain Patten was seen passing the lodge at 9:30 or thereabouts. Mr. Geoffrey Raymond hears someone in there asking for money, and Mr. Ackroyd refusing. What happens next? Captain Patten leaves the same way, through the windows. He walks along the terrace, angry and baffled. He comes to the open drawing window. Say it's now 9:45. Miss Flora Ackroyd is saying good night to her uncle, Major Blunt. Mr. Raymond and Mrs. Ackroyd are in the billiard room. The drawing room is empty. He steals in, takes the dagger from the silver table, and returns to the study window. He slips off his shoes, climbs in, and, well, I don't need to go into details. Then he slips out again and goes off. He hadn't the nerve to go back to the inn. He makes for the station, rings up from there. Why? Said Poirot softly. I jumped at the interruption. The little man was leaning forward. His eyes shone with a queer green light. For a moment, Inspector Raglan was taken aback by the question. It's difficult to say exactly why he did that, he said at last. But murderers do funny things. You know that if you were in the police force. The cleverest of them make stupid mistakes sometimes. But come along and I'll show you those footprints. We followed him around the corner of the terrace to the study window. At a word from Raglan, a police constable produced the shoes which had been obtained from the local inn. The inspector laid them over the marks. They're the same, he said confidently. That is to say, they're not the same pair that actually made these prints. He went away in those. This is a pair just like them, but older. See how the studs are worn down? Surely a great many people wear shoes with rubber studs in them, asked Poirot. That's so, of course, said the inspector. I shouldn't put so much stress on the footmarks if it wasn't for everything else. A very foolish young man, Captain Ralph Patten, said Poirot thoughtfully, to leave so much evidence of his presence. Ah, well, said the inspector. It was a dry, fine night, you know. He left no prints on the terrace or on the gravelled path. But, unluckily for him, a spring must have welled up just lately at the end of the path from the drive. See here. A small gravelled path joined the terrace a few feet away. In one spot, a few yards from its termination, the ground was wet and boggy. Crossing this wet place, there again were the marks of footsteps, amongst them the shoes with rubber studs. Poirot followed the path on a little way, the inspector by his side. Hello, Mr. Smarties, how are you? You noticed the women's footprints, he said suddenly. The inspector laughed. Naturally, but several different women have walked this way and men as well. It's a regular shortcut to the house, you see. It would be impossible to sort out all the footsteps. After all, it's the ones on the windowsill that are really important. I'm late for class. It's okay. I'll excuse it this time as long as you have a pass. Let me have a sip of my drink. And you're Normie, really? I am a little sleepy, actually. I was going to do this at an hour ago at my time, but I was napping. How do you get passes? You get them from your other teachers. No, it's okay. We're on chapter 8. Okay, and I have to hold my phone tracking because it's not working well. Okay. Poirot nodded. It's no good going further, said the inspector. As we came in view of the drive, it's all gravelled again here, and hard as it can be. Well, Miss Ray is not on right now, but there are several teachers. Miss Ray is the art teacher. Again, Poirot nodded, but his eyes were fixed on a small garden house, a kind of superior summer house. It was a little to the left of the path ahead of us, and a gravelled walk ran up to it. Poirot lingered about until the inspector had gone back towards the house. Then he looked at me. You must have indeed been sent from the good God to replace my friend Hastings, he said with a twinkle. I observe that you do not quit my side. How say you, Dr. Shepherd? Shall we investigate that summer house? It interests me. He went up to the door and opened it. Inside, the place was almost dark. There were 1 or 2 rustic seats, a croquet set, and some folded deck chairs. I was startled to observe my new friend. He had dropped to his hands and knees and was crawling about the floor. Every now and then he shook his head as though not satisfied. Finally, he sat back on his heels. Nothing, he murmured. Well, perhaps it was not to be expected, but it would have meant so much. He broke off, stiffening all over. Then he stretched out his hand to one of the rustic chairs. He detached something from one side of it. What is it? I cried. What have you found? He smiled, unclosing his hand so that I could see what lay in the palm of it. A scrap of stiff white cambric. I took it from him, looked at it curiously, and then handed it back. What do you make of it, my friend? He asked, eyeing me keenly. A torn scrap from a handkerchief, I suggested, shrugging my shoulders. He made another dart and picked up a small quill, a goose quill by the look of it. And that, he cried triumphantly. What do you make of that? I only stared. He slipped the quill into his pocket and looked again at the scrap of white stuff. A fragment of a handkerchief, he mused. Perhaps you are right, but remember this. A good laundry does not starch a handkerchief. He nodded at me triumphantly. Then he put away the scrap carefully in his pocketbook. Chapter 8 is done. Our teacher, let's go! Our fun, but I'm bad at. Me too. I'm not the best. Miss Ray is not here right now. I don't think she's streaming, but she's not in. Welcome to anyone else who's joining class. Feel free to hit the follow button to get alerts when class goes live. Chapter 9. Actually, let me take a sip of water first before I begin. Chapter 9. I'm thirsty. And no one's watering me. I do have a Discord server. I don't think I have my socials linked on this yet. Leon hasn't been in to work. He hasn't been in to kind of mess around with my settings. I can post that on Twitter. Okay. 9. The Goldfish Pond. We walked back to the house together. There was no sign of the inspector. Poirot paused on the terrace and stood with his back to the house, slowly turning his head from side to side. Une belle propriété, he said at last appreciatively. Who inherits it? His words gave me almost a shock. It is an odd thing, but until that moment the question of inheritance had never come into my head. Poirot watched me keenly. It is a new idea to you, that, he said at last. You had not thought of it before, eh? No, I said truthfully. I wish I had. He looked at me again curiously. I wonder just what you mean by that, he said thoughtfully. Oh, no, I was about to speak. Inutile. You would not tell me your real thought. Everyone has something to hide, I quoted, smiling. Exactly. You still believe that? More than ever, my friend, but it is not easy to hide things from Hercule Poirot. He has a knack of finding out. He descended the steps of the Dutch garden as he spoke. Let us walk a little, he said over his shoulder. The air is pleasant today. I followed him. He led me down a path to the left, enclosed in yew hedges. A walk led down the middle, bordered each side with formal flower beds, and at the end was a round paved recess with a seat and a pond of goldfish. Instead of pursuing the path to the end, Poirot I just lost my Poirot took another which wound up the side of a wooded slope. In one spot the trees had been cleared away, and a seat had been put. Sitting there, one had a splendid view over the countryside, and one looked right down on the paved recess and the goldfish pond. I just realized I am not on the correct screen. I don't know why. I didn't switch to this one. This makes me sad. This is my best screen for this. There we go. Now I'm in the right place. Okay, let's see. Okay. No, that's not gonna work. Okay. Okay, here we go. There we go. That's better. You're here. Hi, Miss Ray. Mr. Smarties is late for class. So if you have a pass for him, that would be great. England is very beautiful, said Poirot, his eyes straying over the prospect. Then he smiled. And so are English girls, he said in a lower voice. Hush, my friend, and look at the pretty picture below us. Here's your pass. It was then that I saw Flora. She was moving along the path we had just left, and she was humming a little snatch of song. Her step was more dancing than walking, and in spite of her black dress, there was nothing but joy in her whole attitude. That's my laugh. Good. She gave a sudden pirouette on her toes, and her black draperies swung out. At the same time, she flung her head back and laughed outright. As she did so, a man stepped out from the trees. It was Hector Blunt. The girl started. Her expression changed a little. How you startled me. I didn't see you. Blunt said nothing, but stood looking at her for a minute or two in silence. What I like about you, said Flora, with a touch of malice, is your cheery conversation. I fancy that at that Blunt reddened under his tan. His voice, when he spoke, sounded different. It had a curious sort of humility in it. Never was much of a fellow for talking, not even when I was young. That was a very long time ago, I suppose, said Flora gravely. I caught the undercurrent of laughter in her voice, but I didn't think Blunt did. Yes, he said simply. It was. How does it feel to be Methuselah? Asked Flora. This time the laughter was more apparent, but Blunt was following out an idea of his own. Remember the Johnny who sold his soul to the devil in return for being made young again? There's an opera about it. Faust, you mean? That's the beggar. Rum story. Some of us would do that if we could. Anyone would think you were creaking at the joints to hear you talk, cried Flora, half vexed, half amused. Blunt said nothing for a minute or two. Then he looked away from Flora into the middle distance and observed to an adjacent tree trunk that it was about time he got back to Africa. Are you going on another expedition, shooting things? Expect so. Usually do, shoot things, I mean. You shot that head in the hall, didn't you? Blunt nodded. Then he jerked out, going rather red as he did so. Care for some decent skins any time? If so, I could get 'em for you. Oh, please do, cried Flora. Will you really? You won't forget? I shan't forget, said Hector Blunt. He added in a sudden burst of communicativeness, Time I went. I'm no good in this sort of life. Haven't got the manners for it. I'm a rough fellow, no use in society. Never remember the things one's expected to say. Yes, time I went. But you're not going at once, cried Flora. No, not while we're all in this trouble. Oh, please, if you go. She turned away a little. You want me to stay? Asked Blunt. He spoke deliberately, but quite simply. I meant you personally, said Blunt, with directness. Flora turned slowly back again and met his eyes. I want you to stay, she said, if that makes any difference. It makes all the difference, said Blunt. What's happening? There was a moment's silence. They sat down on the stone seat by the goldfish pond. It seemed as though neither of them knew quite what to say next. It's such a lovely morning, said Flora at last. I can't help feeling happy. Oh, good, I'm glad. I can't help feeling happy in spite of everything. That's awful, I suppose. Is she flirting with him? Quite natural, said Blunt. Never saw your uncle until 2 years ago, did you? Can't be expected to grieve very much. Much better to have no humbug about it. There's something awfully consoling about you, said Flora. You make things seem so simple. Things are simple as a rule, said the big game hunter. Not always, said Flora. Her voice had lowered itself, and I saw Blunt turn and look at her, bringing his eyes back from, apparently, the coast of Africa, to do so. He evidently put his own construction on her change of tone, for he said, after a minute or two, in a rather abrupt manner, I say, you mustn't worry. About that young chap, I mean. Inspector's an ass. Everybody knows, utterly absurd to think he could have done it. Man from outside. Burglar chap. That's the only possible solution. Flora turned to look at him. You really think so? Don't you? Said Blunt quickly. Oh, yes, of course. Another silence, and then Flora burst out. I'll tell you why I felt so happy this morning. However heartless you think me, I'd rather tell you. It's because the lawyer has been Mr. Hammond. He told us about the will. Uncle Roger has left me 20,000 pounds. Think of it, 20,000 beautiful pounds. Blunt looked surprised. Does it mean so much to you? Mean much to me? Why, it's everything. Freedom, life, no more scheming and scraping and lying. Lying? Said Blunt, sharply interrupting. Flora seemed taken aback for a minute. You know what I mean, she said uncertainly. Pretending to be thankful for all the nasty cast-off things rich relations give you. Last year's coats and skirts and hats. Don't know much about ladies' clothes. Should have said you were always very well turned out, though. Cost me something, though, said Flora in a low voice. Don't let's talk about horrid things. I'm so happy. I'm free. Free to do what I like. Free not to... She stopped suddenly. Not to what? Asked Blunt quickly. I forget now. Nothing important. Blunt had a stick in his hand, and he thrust it into the pond, poking at something. What are you doing, Major Blunt? There's something bright down there. Wondered what it was. Looks like a gold brooch. Now I've stirred up the mud and it's gone. Perhaps it's a crown, suggested Flora, like the one Melisande saw in the water. Melisande, said Blunt reflectively. She's in an opera, isn't she? Yes, you seem to know a lot about operas. People take me sometimes, said Blunt sadly. Funny idea of pleasure. Worse racket than the natives make with their tom-toms. Flora laughed. I remember Melisande, continued Blunt, married an old chap old enough to be her father. There we go. He threw a small piece of flint into the goldfish pond. Then, with a change of manner, he turned to Flora. Miss Ackroyd, can I do anything? About Patton, I mean. I know how dreadfully anxious you must be. Thank you, said Flora in a cold voice. There is really nothing to be done. Ralph will be all right. I've got hold of the most wonderful detective in the world, and he's going to find out all about it. For some time I had felt uneasy as to our position. We were not exactly eavesdropping, since the two in the garden below had only to lift their heads to see us. Nevertheless, I should have drawn attention to our presence before now, had not my companion put a warning pressure on my arm. Clearly he wished to remain silent. Now, however, he acted briskly. He rose quickly to his feet, clearing his throat. I demand pardon, he cried. I cannot allow mademoiselle thus extravagantly to compliment me, and not draw attention to my presence. They say the listener hears no good of himself, but that is not the case this time. To spare my blushes, I must join you and apologize. He hurried down the path with me close behind him, and joined the others by the pond. This is Monsieur Hercule Poirot, said Flora. I expect you've heard of him. Poirot bowed. I know Major Blunt by reputation, he said politely. I'm glad to have encountered you, monsieur. I am in need of some information that you can give me. Blunt looked at him inquiringly. When did you last see Monsieur Ackroyd alive? At dinner. And you neither saw nor heard anything of him after that? Didn't see him. Heard his voice. How was that? I strolled out on the terrace. Pardon me, what time was that? About 9:30. I was walking up and down smoking in front of the drawing-room window. I heard Ackroyd talking in his study. Poirot stopped and removed a microscopic weed. Surely you couldn't hear voices in the study from that part of the terrace, he murmured. I was not looking at Blunt, but I was, and to my intense surprise, saw the latter flush. Went as far as the corner, he explained unwillingly. Ah, indeed, said Poirot. In the mildest manner, he conveyed an impression that more was wanted. Ooh, good. I'm glad I can be engaging enough while I read. Thought I saw a woman disappearing into the bushes. Just a gleam of white, you know. Must have been mistaken. It was while I was standing at the corner of the terrace that I heard Ackroyd's voice speaking to that secretary of his. Speaking to Mr. Geoffrey Raymond? Yes, that's what I supposed at this time. Seems I was wrong. Oh, Leon, thank you for the sub. Aw, 2 months. Whee! Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Yay. That makes me happy. Welcome to class, Leon. It's been a while since I've seen you in here. Let's see. Happy Sophia is best Sophia. Happy Sophia is best Sophia. In and out. Oh, Lord. I don't even know what's happening in my chat. It's fine. Mr. Ackroyd didn't address him by name. Oh, no. Then if I may ask, why did you think... Blunt explained laboriously. I took it for granted that it would be Raymond, because he had said just before I came out that he was taking some papers to Ackroyd. Never thought of it being anybody else. Can you remember what the words you heard were? Afraid I can't. Something quite ordinary and unimportant. Only caught a scrap of it. I was thinking of something else at the time. What's happening? Ray! Thank you for the sub! Oh my gosh. I appreciate that so much. I just realized the alerts are behind the chat. Oh my gosh, thank you so much. You guys didn't have to do that. Let's move the alerts over here. Ah! Oh my god, what is happening? 2 subs? Thank you, Ray. You didn't have to do that. Oh my god. Thank you. Mecha and Soul Snatcher have subs. Yay! That's exciting. And cheered 10 bits. What's going on? Guys. Oh no! What is happening? Ah! A hype train? What? Oh my god. What is going on? The scam train? Why is it a scam train? Oh my god, thank you guys. And thank you for the bits. Ray, stop with the bits or cheering. Upstaged by the 200. Oh, thank you, Leon, for the shout outs. Thanks for doing those for me. Why do you say it's a scam train? Oh my god. It's my first hype train. You hear my laugh more. Because Twitch pockets most of the money. That's true. I can tell you love my laugh, yes. It makes me happy to know. Oh my goodness. That money will go towards more books for reading on stream. Oh. It's all happening so suddenly. It's really, it is amusing. That's why it's like, what is happening? I don't know what's going on. I've apparently turned myself around. I'm all like confused and famous. Oh my god! Leon, what? What is happening? Leon. Oh no. Oh my god. Congratulations, Lorelai! A sub! Whee! Oh, I'm so confused too. I don't know what's going on. This was a chill reading stream, and now suddenly I've got subs and more viewers in. My goodness. It's her Oprah. You get a sub. You get a sub. Everyone gets a sub. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it. You really didn't have to do that. I'm just happy to stream and know that the reading, everyone enjoys the reading. Welcome. Yay. Your tuition has been paid. Okay, where was I in the book? Oh my god, I put it down for a second. I have no idea what's going on. I need the other otter hype emote, y'all, so please nobody come in and donate like 50 subs, I beg. There's an otter hype emote? I didn't know that. Thanks for the sub. Start streaming soon, be legit content. Yay, I'll be excited. You'll have to let us know when you debut so we can all be there. There are 2. Is he gatekeeping? Oh, that's cute. The other completes this. Oh, that's adorable. How do you get that? Do you get it for like being the number 1 in hype treats? Oh. Okay, let's see. Let's see. Major Blunt was on the terrace. Okay. Can you remember what the words you heard? He was singing something else. It's of no importance, murmured Poirot. Did you move a chair back against the wall when you went into the study after the body was discovered? Chair? No, why should I? Poirot shrugged his shoulders, but did not answer. He turned to Flora. There is one thing I should like to know from you, mademoiselle. When you were examining the things in the silver table with Dr. Shepherd, was the dagger in its place or was it not? Flora's chin shot up. Inspector Raglan has been asking me that, she said resentfully. I've told him, and I'll tell you, I'm perfectly certain the dagger was not there. He thinks it was, and that Ralph sneaked it later in the evening, and he does not believe me. He thinks I'm saying it so, to shield Ralph. And aren't you? I asked gravely. Oh, hydrate, thank you, I need that in a moment. Flora stamped her foot. You too, Dr. Shepherd. Oh, it's too bad. Poirot tactfully made a diversion. It is true what I heard you say, Major Blunt. There is something that glitters in this pond. Let us see if I can reach it. He knelt down by the pond, bearing his arm to the elbow, and lowered it very slowly so as not to disturb the bottom of the pond. But in spite of all his precautions, the mud eddied and swirled, and he was forced to withdraw his arm out again empty-handed. He gazed ruefully at the mud upon his arm. I offered him my handkerchief, which he accepted with fervent protestations of thanks. Blunt looked at his watch. Nearly lunchtime, he said. We'd better be getting back to the house. Okay, water. Everybody who participates. A level 1 hype train emote. Yay! Everyone who participates gets a random hype emote, but they change according to the levels that the train reaches. Ah, you've got a cat. It seems. I didn't know that was a thing. Yay, a level 1 hype train. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. Oop, I've all turned around again. You didn't get the otter. That's okay. You'll get the otter sometime. Oh, kitties. That's perfect for this one. A cute cat is perfect. My floofs are upstairs sleeping, so that's always good. Okay. Alright, my face tracking is almost dead, so we'll see what happens. Of course, I'm frozen in a smile. What is happening? Oh, my tracking today is terrible. I wonder if it's because I did 2 streams in a day. I don't know. Okay. Let's read some more, at least. You will lunch with us, Monsieur Perrault, asked Flora. I should like you to meet my mother. She is very fond of Ralph. The little man bowed. I shall be delighted, mademoiselle. And you'll stay too, won't you, Dr. Shepherd? I hesitated. Oh, do. I wanted to, so I accepted the invitation without further ceremony. We set out towards the house, Flora and Blunt walking ahead. What hair? Said Poirot to me in a low tone, nodding towards Flora. The real gold. They will make a pretty couple, she and the dark, handsome Captain Patten, will they not? I looked at him inquiringly, but he began to fuss about a few microscopic drops of water on his coat sleeve. The man reminded me in some ways of a cat, his green eyes and his finicking habits. And all for nothing, too, I said sympathetically. I wonder what was in the pond. Would you like to see? Asked Poirot. I stared at him. He nodded. My good friend, he said gently and reproachfully. Hercule Poirot does not run the risk of disarranging his costume without being sure of attaining his object. To do so would be ridiculous and absurd. I am never ridiculous. But you brought your hand out empty, I objected. There are times when it is necessary to have discretion. Do you tell your patients everything? But everything, doctor? I think not. Nor do you tell your excellent sister everything either? Is it not so? Before showing my empty hand, I had dropped what it contained in my other hand. You shall see what that was. He held out his left hand, palm open. On it lay a little circle of gold, a woman's wedding ring. I took it from him. Look inside, commanded Poirot. I did so. Inside was an inscription in fine writing. From R, March 13th. That's my birthday. I looked at Poirot, but he was busy inspecting his appearance in a tiny pocket glass. He paid particular attention to his mustache, and none at all to me. I saw that he did not intend to be communicative. Oh my. So, that must be Flora's wedding band from Ralph, I would assume. Let's see. How many pages in chapter 10? I think we can read one more chapter. I'm not sure how long my facial tracking will last, but let's see. Chapter 10, The Parlor Maid. We found Mrs. Ackroyd in the hall. With her was a small, dried-up little man with an aggressive chin and sharp gray eyes, and lawyer written all over him. Mr. Hammond is staying to lunch with us, said Mrs. Ackroyd. You know Major Blunt, Mr. Hammond, and dear Dr. Shepherd, also a close friend of poor Roger's, and let me see. He paused, surveying Hercule Poirot in some perplexity. This is Monsieur Poirot, mother, said Flora. I told you about him this morning. Oh, yes, said Mrs. Ackroyd vaguely. Of course, my dear, of course. He is to find Ralph, is he not? He is to find out who killed Uncle, said Flora. Oh, my dear, cried her mother. Please, my poor nerves. I am a wreck this morning, a positive wreck. Such a dreadful thing to happen. I can't help feeling that it must have been an accident of some kind. Roger was so fond of handling queer curios. His hand must have slipped or something. Yeah, slipped and stabbed himself in the neck. Okay. She's not the smartest one here. The theory was received in polite silence. I saw Poirot edge up to the lawyer and speak to him in a confidential undertone. They moved aside to the embrasure of the window. I joined them, then hesitated. Perhaps I'm intruding, I said. Not at all, cried Poirot heartily. You and I, Monsieur le Docteur, we investigate this affair side by side. Without you, I should be lost. I desire a little information from the good Mr. Hammond. You are acting on behalf of Captain Ralph Patten, I understand, said the lawyer cautiously. Poirot shook his head. Not so. I am acting in the interests of justice. Miss Ackroyd has asked me to investigate the death of her uncle. Mr. Hammond seemed slightly taken aback. I cannot seriously believe that Captain Patten can be concerned in this crime, he said, however strong the circumstantial evidence against him may be. The mere fact that he was hard-pressed for money. Was he hard-pressed for money? Interpolated Poirot quickly. The lawyer shrugged his shoulders. It was a chronic condition with Ralph Patten, he said dryly. Money went through his hands like water. He was always applying to his stepfather. Had he done so of late? During the last year, for instance? I cannot say. Mr. Ackroyd did not mention the fact to me. I comprehend, Mr. Hammond. I take it that you are acquainted with the provisions of Mr. Ackroyd's will? Certainly. That is my principal business here today. Then, seeing that I am acting for Miss Ackroyd, you will not object to telling me the terms of that will? They are quite simple. Shorn of legal phraseology, and after paying certain legacies and bequests, such as, interrupted Poirot. Mr. Hammond seemed a little surprised. £1,000 to his housekeeper, Miss Russell, £50 to the cook, Emma Cooper, £500 to his secretary, Mr. Geoffrey Raymond, then to various hospitals. Poirot held up his hand. Ah, the charitable bequests. They interest me not. Quite so. The income on £10,000 worth of shares to be paid to Mrs. Cecil Ackroyd during her lifetime. Miss Flora Ackroyd inherits £20,000 outright. The residue, including this property and the shares in Ackroyd and Son, to his adopted son Ralph Patten. Mr. Ackroyd possessed a large fortune, a very large fortune. Captain Patten will be an exceedingly wealthy young man. There was a silence. Poirot and the lawyer looked at each other. Mr. Hammond, came Mrs. Ackroyd's voice plaintively from the fireplace. The lawyer answered the summons. Poirot took my arm and drew me right into the window. Regard the irises, he remarked in a rather loud voice. Magnificent, are they not? A straight and pleasing effect. At the same time I felt the pressure of his hand on my arm, and he added in a low tone, turn the page. Do you really wish to aid me, to take part in this investigation? Yes, indeed, I said eagerly. There's nothing I should like better. You don't know what a dull old fogey's life I lead. Never anything out of the ordinary. Good, we'll be colleagues then. In a minute or two I fancy Major Blunt will join us. He is not happy with the good mamma. Now there are some things I want to know, but I do not wish to seem to want to know them. You comprehend? So it will be your part to ask the questions. What questions do you want me to ask? I asked apprehensively. I want you to introduce the name of Mrs. Ferrars. My cats are doing something upstairs. The floofs are in trouble. Yes, speak of her in a natural fashion. Ask him if he was down here when her husband died. You understand the kind of thing I mean. And while he replies, watch his face without seeming to watch it. C'est compris? There was no time for more, for at that minute, as Monsieur Poirot had prophesied, Blunt left the others in his abrupt fashion and came over to us. I suggested strolling on the terrace, and he acquiesced. Poirot stayed behind. I stopped to examine a late rose. How things changed in the course of a day or two, I observed. I was up here last Wednesday, I remember, walking up and down the same terrace. Ackroyd was with me, full of spirits, and now, 3 days later, Ackroyd's dead, poor fellow. Mrs. Ferrars dead. You knew her, didn't you? But of course you did. Blunt nodded his head. Had you seen her since you'd been down this time? Went with Ackroyd to call. Oh, thank you, Clarissa. Thanks for stopping in. I appreciate it. Went with Ackroyd to call last Tuesday, I think it was. Fascinating woman, but something queer about her. Deep. One would never know what she was up to. I looked into his steady gray eyes. Nothing there, surely. I went on. I suppose you'd met her before? Last time I was here, she and her husband had just come here to live. He paused a minute and then added, rum thing, she had changed a lot between then and now. How changed? I asked. Looked 10 years older. Were you down here when her husband died? I asked, trying to make the question sound as casual as possible. No, from all I heard it would be a good riddance. Uncharitable, perhaps, but the truth. I agreed. Ashley Ferrars was by no means a pattern husband, I said cautiously. Blackguard, I thought, said Blunt. No, I said, only a man with more money than was good for him. Oh, money. All the troubles in the world can be put down to money, or the lack of it. Which has been your particular trouble? I asked. Enough for what I want. I'm one of the lucky ones. Indeed. I'm not too flush just now, as a matter of fact. Came into a legacy a year ago, and like a fool let myself be persuaded into putting it into some wildcat scheme. I sympathized and narrated my own similar trouble. Then the gong pealed out, and we all went in to lunch. Poirot drew me back a little. Eh bien? He's all right, I said. I'm sure of it. Nothing disturbing? He had a legacy just a year ago, I said. But why not? Why shouldn't he? I'll swear the man is perfectly square and above board. Without doubt, said Poirot soothingly. Do not upset yourself. He spoke as though to a fractious child. We all trooped into the dining room. It seemed incredible that less than 24 hours had passed since I last sat at that table. Afterwards, Mrs. Ackroyd took me aside and sat down with me on a sofa. I can't help feeling a little hurt, she murmured, producing a handkerchief of the kind obviously not meant to be cried into. Hurt, I mean, by Roger's lack of confidence in me. That £20,000 ought to have been left to me, not to Flora. A mother could be trusted to safeguard the interests of her child. A lack of trust, I call it. You forget, Mrs. Ackroyd, I said. Flora was Ackroyd's own niece, a blood relation. It would have been different had you been his sister instead of his sister-in-law. As poor Cecil's widow, I think my feelings ought to have been considered, said the lady, touching her eyelashes gingerly with the handkerchief. But Roger was always most peculiar, not to say mean, about money matters. It has been a most difficult position for both Flora and myself. He did not even give the poor child an allowance. He would pay her bills, you know, and even that with a good deal of reluctance, and asking what she wanted all those fallals for, so like a man. But now I've forgotten what it was I was going to say. Oh, yes, not a penny we could call our own, you know. Flora resented it. Yes, I must say she resented it very strongly, though devoted to her uncle, of course. But any girl would have resented it. Yes, I must say Roger had very strange ideas about money. He wouldn't even buy me new face towels, though I told him the old ones were in holes. And then, proceeded Mrs. Ackroyd with a sudden leap highly characteristic of her conversation, to leave all that money, £1,000, fancy, £1,000 to that woman. What woman? That Russell woman. Something very queer about her, and so I've always said. But Roger wouldn't hear a word against her, said she was a woman of great force of character, and that he admired and respected her. He was always going on about her rectitude and independence and moral worth. I think there's something fishy about her. She was certainly doing her best to marry Roger, but I soon put a stop to that. She always hated me, naturally. I saw through her. I began to wonder if there was any chance of stemming Mrs. Ackroyd's eloquence and getting away. Mr. Hammond provided the necessary diversion by coming up to say goodbye. I seized my chance and rose also. Ooh, this aunt is not pleasant, or this sister-in-law. You will find the 100 intact, I know, for Mr. Ackroyd put it in the collar box in my presence last night. Oh, did I skip a page? Oh, I did. About the inquest, I said. Where would you prefer it to be held, here or at the Three Boars? Mrs. Ackroyd stared at me with a dropped jaw. The inquest, she asked, the picture of consternation. But surely there won't have to be an inquest. Mr. Hammond gave a dry little cough and murmured, inevitable, under the circumstances, in two short little barks. But surely Dr. Shepherd can arrange. There are limits in my powers of arrangement, I said dryly. If his death was an accident. He was murdered, Mrs. Ackroyd, I said brutally. She gave a little cry. No theory of accident will hold water for a minute. Mrs. Ackroyd looked at me in distress. I had no patience with what I thought was her silly fear of unpleasantness. If there's an inquest, I shan't have it to answer questions and all, shall I? She asked. I don't know what will be necessary, I answered. I imagine Mr. Raymond will take the brunt of it off you. He knows all the circumstances and can give formal evidence of identification. The lawyer assented with a little bow. I really don't think there is anything to dread, Mrs. Ackroyd, he said. You will be spared all the unpleasantness. Now, as to the question of money, have you all you need for the present? I mean, he added, as she looked at him inquiringly, ready money, cash, you know. If not, I can arrange to let you have whatever you require. That ought to be all right, said Raymond, who was standing by. Mr. Ackroyd cashed a check for £100 yesterday. £100? Yes, for wages and other expenses due today. At the moment, it is still intact. Where is this money? In his desk? No, he always kept his cash in his bedroom, in an old collar box to be accurate. Funny idea, wasn't it? I think, said the lawyer, we ought to make sure the money is there before I leave. Certainly, agreed the secretary. I'll take you up now. Oh, I forgot. The door's locked. Inquiry from Parker elicited the information that Inspector Raglan was in the housekeeper's room asking a few supplementary questions. A few minutes later, the inspector joined the party in the hall, bringing the key with him. He unlocked the door, and we passed into the lobby and up the small staircase. At the top of the stairs, the door into Ackroyd's bedroom stood open. Inside the room it was dark, the curtains were drawn, and the bed was turned down just as it had been last night. The inspector drew the curtains, letting in the sunlight, and Geoffrey Raymond went to the top drawer of a rosewood bureau. He kept his money like that, in an unlocked drawer. Just fancy, commented the inspector. The secretary flushed a little. Mr. Ackroyd had perfect faith in the honesty of all the servants, he said hotly. Oh, quite so, said the inspector hastily. Raymond opened the drawer, took out a round leather collar box from the back of it, and opening it, drew out a thick wallet. Here's the money, he said, taking out a fat roll of notes. You will find the 100 intact, I know, for Mr. Ackroyd put it in the collar box in my presence last night when he was dressing for dinner, and of course it has not been touched since. Mr. Hammond took the roll from him and counted it. He looked up sharply. £100, you said, but there is only 60 here. Raymond stared at him. Impossible, he cried, springing forward. Taking the notes from the other's hand, he counted them aloud. Mr. Hammond had been right. The total amounted to £60. But I can't understand it, cried the secretary, bewildered. Poirot asked a question. You saw Mr. Ackroyd put this money away last night when he was dressing for dinner? You were sure he had not paid away any of it already? I'm sure he hadn't. He even said, I don't want to take £100 down to dinner with me. Too bulgy. Then the affair is very simple, remarked Poirot. Either he put out that £40 sometime last evening, or else it has been stolen. That's the matter in a nutshell, agreed the inspector. He turned to Mrs. Ackroyd. Which of the servants would come in here yesterday evening? I suppose the housemaid would turn down the bed. Who is she? What do you know about her? She's not been here very long, said Mrs. Ackroyd, but she's a nice, ordinary country girl. I think we ought to clear this matter up, said the inspector. If Mr. Ackroyd paid that money away himself, it may have a bearing on the mystery of the crime. The other servants all right, as far as you know? Oh, I think so. Not missed anything before? No. None of them leaving or anything like that? The parlor maid is leaving. When? She gave notice yesterday, I believe. To you? Oh, no. I have nothing to do with the servants. Miss Russell attends to the household matters. My tracking is off again. Ah, there we go. The inspector remained lost in thought for a minute or two. Then he nodded his head and remarked, I think I'd better have a word with Miss Russell. And I'll see the girl Dale as well. Poirot and I accompanied him to the housekeeper's room. Miss Russell received us with her usual sang-froid. Elsie Dale had been at Fernley 5 months, a nice girl, quick at her duties, and most respectable. Good references. The last girl in the world to take anything not belonging to her. What about the parlor maid? She, too, was a most superior girl, very quiet and ladylike, an excellent worker. Then why is she leaving? Asked the inspector. Miss Russell pursed her lips. It was none of my doing. I understand Mr. Ackroyd found fault with her yesterday afternoon. It was her duty to the study, I think, to the study, and she disarranged some of the papers on his desk, I believe. He was very annoyed about it, and she gave notice. At least, that is what I understood from her, but perhaps you'd like to see her yourselves? The inspector assented. I had already noticed the girl when she was waiting on us at lunch. A tall girl, with a lot of brown hair rolled tightly away at the back of her neck, and very steady gray eyes. She came in answer to the housekeeper's summons, and stood very straight with those same gray eyes fixed on us. You are Ursula Bourne? Asked the inspector. Yes, sir. I understand you are leaving? Yes, sir. Why is that? I disarranged some papers on Mr. Ackroyd's desk. He was very angry about it, and I said I had better leave. You told me to go as soon as possible. Were you in Mr. Ackroyd's bedroom at all last night, tidying up or anything? No, sir. That is Elsie's work. I never went near that part of the house. I must tell you, my girl, that a large sum of money is missing from Mr. Ackroyd's room. At last I saw her roused. A wave of color swept over her face. I know nothing about any money. If you think I took it, and that is why Mr. Ackroyd dismissed me, you are wrong. I'm not accusing you of taking it, my girl, said the inspector. Don't flare up so. The girl looked at him coldly. You can search my things if you like, she said disdainfully, but you won't find anything. Poirot suddenly interposed. It was yesterday afternoon that Mr. Ackroyd dismissed you, or you dismissed yourself, was it not? He asked. The girl nodded. How long did the interview last? The interview? Yes, the interview between you and Mr. Ackroyd in the study. I don't know. 20 minutes, half an hour? Something like that. Not longer? Not longer than half an hour, certainly. Thank you, mademoiselle. I looked curiously at him. He was rearranging a few objects on the table, setting them straight with precise fingers. His eyes were shining. That'll do, said the inspector. Ursula Bourne disappeared. The inspector turned to Miss Russell. How long has she been here? Have you got a copy of the reference you had with her? Without answering the first question, Miss Russell moved to the adjacent bureau, opened one of the drawers, and took out a handful of letters clipped together with a patent fastener. She selected one and handed it to the inspector. Said he. Reads all right. Mrs. Richard Folliot, Marby Grange, Marby. Who's this woman? Quite good country people, said Miss Russell. Well, said the inspector, handing it back, let's have a look at the other one, Elsie Dale. Elsie Dale was a big, fair girl, with a pleasant but slightly stupid face. She answered our questions readily enough, and showed much distress and concern at the loss of the money. I don't think there's anything wrong with her, observed the inspector after he had dismissed her. What about Parker? Miss Russell pursed her lips together and made no reply. I have a feeling there's something wrong about that man, the inspector continued thoughtfully. The trouble is that I don't quite see when he got his opportunity. He'd be busy with his duties immediately after dinner, and he'd got a pretty good alibi all through the evening. I know, for I've been devoting particular attention to it. Well, thank you very much, Miss Russell. We'll leave things as they are for the present. It's highly probable Mr. Ackroyd paid that money away himself. The housekeeper bade us a dry, good afternoon, but we took our leave. I left the house with Poirot. I wonder, I said, breaking the silence, what the papers the girl disarranged could have been for Ackroyd to have got into such a state about them. I wonder if there was any clue there to the mystery. The secretary said there were no papers of particular importance on the desk, Poirot said quietly. Yes, but I paused. Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Miss Ray. I appreciate the lurk. Yes, but I paused. It strikes you as odd that Ackroyd should have flown into a rage about so trivial a matter? Yes, it does rather. But was it a trivial matter? Of course, I admitted. We don't know what those papers may have been, but Raymond certainly said, Leave Monsieur Raymond out of it for a minute. What did you think of that girl? Which girl? The parlor maid? Yes, the parlor maid, Ursula Bourne. She seemed a nice girl, I said hesitatingly. Poirot repeated my words, but whereas I had laid a slight stress on the fourth word, he put it on the second. She seemed a nice girl. Yes. was just thinking that she seemed a nice girl. She seemed a nice girl. Then, after a minute's silence, he took something from his pocket and handed it to me. See, my friend, I will show you something. Look there. The paper he had handed me was that compiled by the inspector and given by him to Poirot that morning. Following the pointing finger, I saw a small cross marked in pencil opposite the name Ursula Bourne. You may not have noticed it at the time, my good friend, but there was one person on this list whose alibi had no kind of confirmation. Ursula Bourne. You don't think... Dr. Shepard, I dare to think anything. Ursula Bourne may have killed Mr. Ackroyd, but I confess I can see no motive for her doing so. Can you? He looked at me very hard, so hard that I felt uncomfortable. Can you? He repeated. No motive whatsoever, I said firmly. His gaze relaxed. He frowned and murmured to himself. Since the blackmailer was a man, it follows that she cannot be the blackmailer. Then, I coughed. As far as that goes, I began doubtfully. He spun round on me. What? What are you going to say? Nothing. Only that, strictly speaking, Mrs. Ferrars in her letter mentioned a person. She didn't actually specify a man, but we took it for granted, Ackroyd and I, that it was a man. Poirot did not seem to listen to me. He was muttering to himself again. But then it was possible after all. Yes, certainly it is possible. But then, I must rearrange my ideas. Method, order, never have I needed them more. Everything must fit in its appointed place. Otherwise, I am on the wrong track. He broke off and whirled round upon me again. Where is Marby? It's on the other side of Cranchester. How far away? 14 miles, perhaps. Would it be possible for you to go there tomorrow, say? Tomorrow? Let me see, that's Sunday. Yes, I could arrange it. What do you want me to do there? See this Mrs. Folliot. Find out all you can about Ursula Bourne. Very well, but I don't care much for the job. It is not the time to make difficulties. A man's life may hang on this. Poor Ralph, I said with a sigh. You believe him to be innocent, though. Poirot looked at me gravely. Do you want to know the truth? Of course. Then you shall have it. My friend, everything points to the assumption that he is guilty. What? I exclaimed. Poirot nodded. Yes, that stupid inspector, for he is stupid, has everything pointing his way. I seek for the truth, and the truth leads me every time to Ralph Patten. Motive, opportunity, means. But I will leave no stone unturned. I promised Mademoiselle Flora, and she was very sure, that little one, very sure indeed. End of chapter 11. So the next chapter is oh no, wait, that was the end of chapter 10. We read 8, 9, and 10, yes. The next one is Poirot pays a call, but I think we are going to stop there for the evening because I'm getting rather annoyed with my lack of facial tracking. I need to get this figured out again. But anyone who's left, what do you think of the story today? So we've got Poirot looking into it. We've got the ring. Flora, it seems to be Flora's ring. Mysterious, yes, very mysterious. It seems like Flora tossed her ring in the pond, it seems. Unless it belongs to some other unknown woman. And I'm trying to think what else. Blunt seems a little suspicious. The aunt is certainly, or the sister-in-law is certainly not happy with the arrangements of the money. What was it? Smug? It seems a little suspicious. And everything seems to point to Ralph Patten, which it does seem to be, the one that would have the motive for it. So I guess we'll have to find out next reading. It's very intriguing. It's a shame I missed 3% stream, so it's my 2 cents. Oh no, you can still give your 2 cents, even if you're just tuning in for the first time. What had happened before was that the first 4 chapters starts with the doctor, the narrator, going about everything, and Ralph Patton's in the area. Mrs. Ferrars is dead. She seems to have killed herself out of guilt for killing her husband a year ago. She had been kind of involved with Roger Ackroyd. Then he ends up dead at the end of chapter 4, and now the doctor is involved. Hercule Poirot was the neighbor who was a little strange, and they called him Poirot until they found out who exactly he was. He's a famous detective. So we're going to find out what really happened by the end of the book. If you've read Murder on the Orient Express, that was a Hercule Poirot mystery. Or if you've seen the movie, that was with him. So Death on the Nile is the next Agatha Christie book being turned into a film. Is it turned in? I don't know if it's out yet or not, but it is another Hercule Poirot one. You've seen both? Is it out already? I haven't seen it. Murder on the Nile is out? Oh, I'm going to have to see it. I didn't know if it was or not. I know the bookstores have it. Like, the cover is the movie version, which I absolutely hate when they do that. But I saw that and I'm excited because I actually haven't read the book for that one. I probably should before I read it. Or before I see it. Yeah, double check. I'm not sure. Let's see. Oh, I totally know who we're gonna read after this. Okay. I like reading the Book of Notes too. Yeah. Oh, it is out? Oh my god, I'm like so behind. I need to check that out. I prefer the books to movies, although the Murder on the Orient Express movie was pretty good compared to the book. It was pretty good. I enjoyed it a lot. Earlier in 2022. Oh my god, I missed it. I'm gonna have to rent it or something. Because I really I love Agatha Christie. Yeah, the movie was really good. I thought they did a great job. I knew it was going to happen going in exactly who had done what because of the book, but it was still exciting to see. I wonder if they'll make one for And Then There Were None. Now that is a fantastic mystery. Was it? Oh, good. I'll have to check it out. Maybe I'll read that one privately on my own soon, off stream, since it's not public domain. Miss Ray is involved again. How do you feel about that book? I want to see a movie. Same. I think it would be phenomenal. If you have not read, anyone in chat, yeah, I read it with my students many years ago, and they were like, what is happening? And right after reading it, they wanted more Agatha Christie books for the classroom. So I bought The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. And, there's a movie from 1945. I haven't watched it. I'll have to check it out. But yeah, they wanted to read more, so I brought in The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. And several of my students who read it had the same reaction I did, which was, what? Because the ending of this book is phenomenal. I'm a sucker for murder mysteries like that, so I'm going to try to read the other. Yes, there are a lot. And actually, so there, because I know books so well, there's a new book out, I forget the author, but it's called The Science of Murder. And it's a true crime book, but it's about Agatha Christie and how she used forensics in her books before forensics was even a science, really. Like, she uses fingerprints and blood spatter to talk about solving crimes before that was something that people really did. I think forensics wasn't a thing until the 40s, and she wrote these books in the early 20s, so it's pretty amazing. She's just an incredible author. And there's a reason her books are the third most selling after Shakespeare and the Bible. Yes, you would have seen it on sale at Barnes & Noble because it is their nonfiction pick of the month. I know that because I got the alert for it. So yeah, it is their nonfiction book, which is why I know about it, because I went, ooh, that sounds interesting. I'll have to read it. Oh, we could do. I guess we could do that in the Discord. It wouldn't be able to be on Twitch, but yeah, I definitely would like that to be a Discord event. That would be amazing. Oh my gosh. And I think I actually have the old Hercule Poirot mystery TV series DVDs. My face is not matching on screen, but I'll arrange it. I'll make a poll and see who can make it and when, because I think it'd be great to have everyone involved and kind of do like a watch along. Sophia smug. I'm really not looking smug. I wish the camera tracking would work right now, but apparently my phone is like, no, not happening. It's awful. Okay. So let's see. We have a couple people that are on I'll sleep over my high school. Oh, I thank you. I hate my face right now on this. Can I force it to change? Thank you. That means a lot. I love teaching, and I wish students honestly would just. I wish teachers would just get show how enjoyable reading can be. I know, Leon. I know. My model is smug looking, and that's not how I want to look at all. I'm very angry with this right now. Stop, model. I can't even reset it the right way. The tracking works on the phone, but it's not transferring to the computer. It's a pain. This happened before. Yeah, it frustrates me because reading shouldn't be torturous. It should be a joy. It should be fun. So it makes me upset when teachers kind of kill it for students, which is why I definitely don't do that. I'd rather have a surprised look than a smug one right now, honestly. All right, so, oh, there, the smug is gone. So let me see. We have a couple people we can raid. There's quite a few. Hey, ID, welcome back. Are you sad? Why are you sad? Because my model's not working again. End of stream, sad, yeah. Okay, let's see. Cinna is streaming. It's his debut, but he's got 41 right now, so I don't think we're gonna raid him. He is doing a donathon, I think, or subathon, so check him out over there. Let's see. Kyo's got 37. Bo's got 10. Pico's 8. Sky has 3. Narumi has 2. Canvas has 2. Okay. This is a lot of... Nobody's kind of got the chill, real vibes that we've got going on. Well, a few do, but we're just going to do this. Bouncing between a call and the stream, but I'm glad... Yay, thank you for dropping by. I appreciate it. You may have missed the chaos of the hype train that was earlier, which was amazing. Okay, so Campus is playing the SCP Secret Files, so he's doing a horror game, and I totally want to see that. I'll be watching him as I go to bed tonight anyway. He played something called I'm on Observation Duty last night. So, and I want to play that. I added that to my list. So we're going to raid Campus because I definitely want to see more of this game. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming in. Thank you for the... Oh, I'm moving again. My mouth is moving. Thank you for the subs and the bits. And, oh my god, thank you so much. It means a lot to me. It really does. So we're going to head on over and surprise Campus. Make sure you tell him he forgot his homework. So let me do this. Let's see. Okay. Let me get this up. Make sure you tell him that he forgot his homework when we go into the raid. Yes, you forgot your homework. And you can use, if you are a sub, you can use the angry Sophia. Okay. Oop, my knuckle's cracking. That was bad. Okay, so here we go. Raid channel. Let's see, Canvas, where are you? All right, here we go. All right, we're gonna start raid. Everyone, thank you for joining me. I'll see you next time. Here we go. We're raiding 5, 4. Bye, Ray. Bye, everyone. Bye, ID. Bye, Leon. Bye, Lorelai. Bye.